Georgia Southern sticking with J.C. French at quarterback. It's Locked on Sunbelt.
You are Locked on Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked on Sunbelt, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I do have a parlay question that will need answered quickly by tomorrow, before the kickoff of tonight's Marshall Georgia State ball game. So we'll get to that. All right, we will talk about that with the many home underdogs outside of Marshall this week. And I do want to go off a little bit on defensive pass interference. The example that happened last night with South Alabama is not what I'm talking about. All right, that was this textbook defensive pass interference I think you can find, but that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, Georgia Southern going to stick with J.C. French at quarterback. Clay Helton, Georgia Southern football coach, saying we're sticking with J.C. French. Apparently, he's not a big fan of making a quarterback change. Doesn't think you lose your job by someone playing a little bit better than you in one small sample. And that's it. All right. Obviously, I'm not in Statesboro and probably haven't watched all that much Georgia Southern this year. You can only watch so much on a regular basis. And I don't know how healthy he is. Obviously, he's healthy enough and ready to go. I presume Clay Helton wouldn't put somebody out there. That was actually one of the things he was saying, that he was trying to get to that point. I'm not sure if he made it. You know, you can't play unless you can protect yourself. And so obviously he believes J.C. French can do that. And J.C. French has had a pretty good season, right? His overall numbers are pretty good. 63% completion percentage, not a lot of touchdowns. That has, he's got 7, only 2 interceptions, which is huge when it comes to Georgia Southern quarterbacks. That is abnormal. So that could be the reason he's sticking around. He has not turned the ball over much this year. Has been sacked a little bit. We don't know if that's his fault or the offensive line's fault. And he has rushed a little bit, including what Clay Helton pointed out on a 4th and 10 is where he got dinged up. So Boise State, he put up some pretty good numbers, 322 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Against Nevada, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. South Carolina State, effective numbers, 17 to 23, 211 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Ole Miss, only 109 yards, but that's Ole Miss. That's fine. Against Georgia State, and okay, 24 of 39, 237 with a touchdown, but they were in control of that ball game. And then against Marshall, I'll be honest with you, not as bad as numbers as I thought, considering he was responsible for a grand total of 3 points offensively before the safety. So 16 out of 26, 194 yards and an interception. He did run for 25 yards on 11 carries. But when do you make a quarterback change? Because Clay Helton did say, you know, you lose your job if you're not productive over an extended period of time. So it wasn't over an extended period of time. And it'd be one thing if Dexter Williams, you know, had like, say the fumbles were all on the Marshall 20 and he had a grand total of 40 yards or 50 yards passing because they just didn't have that far to go. But let's make sure we get this. I want to make sure we get this exactly when he came in the ballgame. I was a little confused in previous episodes. Because I think it was at that 6-minute mark, right? It was, let's see here, 4th and 10. Okay, so they started the drive at the 6:45 mark. He came in after J.C. French was banged up. All right, so that is one set of downs. All right, one series of downs. And then Dexter Williams came in and threw for like 135 yards. Oh, no, hold on. I think I'm wrong on that. Let me see. No, I was right. All right, 135 yards. He was 10 of 14, 135, and a touchdown. He also ran for a touchdown. I think that was he also ran for a touchdown, 4 of 13 yards, sacked in there a few times because his long was a 20-yard run. But Dexter Williams put up 135 yards in like 6 minutes of play, maybe even a little bit less. J.C. French was 194 yards. Dexter Williams was responsible for 19 points. They were headed to a 2-score loss with J.C. French in there. That's what I'm trying to figure out. You can justify keeping J.C. French in there. Also, I would give him an extra week. This is a huge ball game, obviously. It's an enormous ball game taking on JMU. All right. So, they're going to, Clay Helton's going to do everything that he can to have his best players out there. So you're not going to, although there's not many, lesser ball games this year, especially in the East. Even Old Dominion is tough in the East. But again, you can justify it any way you want, but we all saw the game. One guy had 3 points. The other guy had 19. Did the other guy get help from Marshall? Sure, of course. But he still had to, as much as Marshall was giving it to Georgia Southern and Dexter Williams II still had to take it from them. So that's where I'm a little bit confused. We saw the production of Georgia Southern, and it was 23-3. 23-5 when he came out. Are we giving J.C. French credit for getting it to, a position where you could punt and put Marshall inside the 5 and get the safety on intentional grounding? So I do find it interesting that we saw the difference in the two. It wasn't like one played the first half and one played the second half. One played 3.5 quarters and got 3 points, and the other played a half a quarter and got 19 points. It wasn't like it was defensive scores. It would have been 21 points if they had kicked the extra points, but you understand why they went for 2 when they did. I absolutely do. So I just don't understand that part of it. I appreciate Clay Helton showing loyalty to his starting quarterback, right? How do you lose your job? By scoring 3 points in 3.5 quarters would seem a pretty good reason to me, but we'll see. All right. It would be interesting to see if they fall behind JMU, do they make a change? Is it 17-0 in the middle of the second quarter and they go to Dexter Williams then? Again, I'm not around the program, all right, on a daily basis, but it seems a little bit odd. This would seem to be, we're going to give J.C. French another week to heal, and we're going to go with Dexter Williams this week because he played incredibly well and he produced. That's the only thing. Trying to figure that one out, right? It's not a failure of J.C. French. The number's a little bit odd, right? He wasn't producing points. He had some yards. He doesn't have a whole lot of yardage. He's not throwing for 300 yards a game, right? Even in the good ball games, he's throwing for 250. So, but the big thing is he's not turning it over, although he did turn it over one time against Marshall. So that's the only thing. I'm a little bit confused when it comes to that. Clay Helton's not wrong that they got, a couple of talented quarterbacks. But it would be interesting to see if J.C. French goes the distance against JMU if they fall behind. If they don't fall behind, then there's no reason to make a change. But if they fall behind again by a couple of scores, because are we going to sit here and you're going to try and explain to me the same thing would have happened with J.C. French if he gets up and he's not, crunched, on that play and sent out of the ball game? Marshall's winning or Georgia Southern's going to win that game. I find that hard to believe. I think Dexter Williams, along with the turnovers, led them to victory. I'm not sure that would have happened if J.C. French was still in there. All right. I appreciate Clay Helton being loyal to his players, but one quarterback played okay and one quarterback played sensational. And the guy who played sensational, you would think would earn the start the next time. That's the way I see it. All right, let's take a timeout. We'll get to the hating the defensive pass interference later on. But we'll come back and talk about outside of Marshall, bunch of home dogs. Do we do a parlay with that? All right. We'll talk about that right after we talk about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. I made that quick correction a couple of nights ago when South Alabama was playing, and I went over to the other state in Indiana, and there's no sports gambling there. So I had some help with that. Missed out. I saw everyone was taking the over on Gio Lopez with 43 yards rushing. Oops, missed out on that one. But we did start off the week 1-0. We'll see how big a week we can have this week. We'll talk about that next. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. So it was interesting to see the lines. We like to go over the early lines-ish. There are 5 more games this week. Marshall, as it turns out, is the only home favorite this week. Marshall is favored by 9 over Georgia State. Seems like a lot, and we don't know who's the starting quarterback. I presume for Marshall, that could be anybody. But then Coastal Carolina is a home dog. They're 4.5-point underdogs to the Cajuns. Texas State, or I should say Old Dominion, is a double-digit home dog to Texas State. Georgia Southern is a 9.5-point underdog to JMU. And Arkansas State is, or in this case, Southern Miss, is a 7-point underdog to Arkansas State. So Coastal's a home underdog, Old Dominion's a home underdog, Georgia Southern's a home underdog, and Southern Miss is a home underdog. Coastal Carolina hosting the Cajuns, Old Dominion hosting Texas State, Georgia Southern hosting James Madison, and Southern Miss hosting Arkansas State, and you got the Marshall-Georgia State game. So this is what someone suggested to me when I pointed all of that out. Sounds like a parlay. I've won one parlay this year. I don't know if it's a sucker bet, but it's close. Those are hard. You seem easy after the fact, but they're really hard. And I got lucky that Southern Miss kept on throwing interceptions, or else the Cajuns were going to lose and not get to a push to make it go from a 4 to a 3-team parlay. Otherwise, I don't win the parlay. But I was thinking about doing all the favorites in a parlay. 5-team parlay, it's only about 3.5 to 1. If you do the 5-team parlay and get all the favorites to cover, it's like 25 to 1. Big difference. Big difference. So can Marshall bounce back? Is there a 9-point favorite hosting Georgia State? Just don't think, and this is Georgia State's first road game, right? This is the first time they are getting on a bus and leaving the city. Forget about the state of Georgia, leaving the city of Atlanta. We've talked about that all season. So we'll see what goes on there. I guess, to be honest with you, I'm a little bit disappointed in how Georgia State has played over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure Panthers fans are as well. I don't think the Cajuns have played particularly well, to be honest with you, but I'm not exactly sure what Coastal Carolina is either. When they've faced the good competition being Virginia and James Madison, they haven't looked very good at all. All right. They did have a nice comeback against Old Dominion and had to hang on. So I'm not exactly sure what the case is. They went on the road. They beat Jacksonville State. That was romp. And then they hung on to beat Temple 28-20. They did blow out William & Mary at home. Did not look very good against Virginia at home. And fell behind Old Dominion 17-7. Here's the difference. The Cajuns are the #1 defense in the Sunbelt right now. The Cajuns are the #1 defense, and they've done it a couple of different ways, right? They shut down the Southern Miss offense a couple of weeks ago, and they kept on turning over the App State offense. So they're playing a really tough ball game. See if the Cajuns can be a little bit more consistent offensively, all right? I like Marshall in the game. In that other game, I like Marshall. I'm not sure 9 is going to work. I would think the Cajuns are going to take this one, but again, winning on the road is hard in college, and that seems like a big line. Like the Cajuns are getting a couple, right? You get 3 points for being at home, so that's like a 7-point. Cajuns are like 7-point favorites or so on a neutral field against Coastal Carolina. Okay. The other ball games, Old Dominion taking on Texas State. I think Texas State played their best ball game of the year against Arkansas State. Offensively, got it going in the second half. Defensively, they were fantastic. I think even G.J. Kinney said, you can look it up. I don't think I've ever had a team not give up a touchdown, and they gave up, 9 points to Arkansas State. UTSA scored 10, but that's a touchdown. Arkansas State had the 3 field goals. So good job by Texas State. They're going up against Old Dominion. Old Dominion has been, woulda, coulda, shoulda this year, right? They could have beaten South Carolina, maybe should have, could have beaten East Carolina, could have beaten Coastal Carolina, and did beat Georgia State, had to hang on. They are the kings of the one-score ball games. So that's why the 10-point game for Texas State is a little bit iffy. If I did do these parlays, I'd bet more on the favorites winning, just on the money line, than on the covering the spread, because that's probably not going to happen. But I'd also, the odds are better. Anyways, so that's going to be a tough one for Texas State. That is at 3:30 Eastern time in Norfolk. And then we have, get back to it. Wait, yeah, okay, there we go. Again, Georgia Southern taking on James Madison. James Madison did a good job bouncing back, right? After the tough loss to Monroe, they throttled Coastal Carolina. Georgia Southern could be one of those. Doesn't feel like Alabama and Georgia got away with one against Marshall, and it sort of masks the deficiencies. JMU looking pretty good right now. And when we say that, again, that's a big line, though, right? 2-score line, 9.5 points. That's a lot. All right. But again, that's, all these. Georgia Southern's pretty good. All right. I think Georgia Southern is pretty good. I think JMU is very good. And obviously, this is a big showdown in the East with the top spot in the East is on the line there. And you do have Southern Miss at Arkansas State. Southern Miss desperately looking for a win. Arkansas State desperately looking for points. It seems to be a little bit of a tough situation for both those teams. We do have the Cajuns are on national TV against Coastal Carolina. That's on the U. And tonight you do have Marshall taking on Georgia State. That's on ESPN2. So that's 3 nationally televised ball games in the week for the Sunbelt. See if we can get a good one out of any of those, depending on which of the betting lines we take. All right, when we come back, we'll talk about how much I hate defensive pass interference right after I tell you about Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy and you don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's health care by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, Dave Schultz, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. Also, in the comment section, going back to the last segment, let me know if you guys like the all road parlay, all favorite parlays. I presume an underdog, one of those home dogs, is going to win, and maybe more than one is going to cover. I do like Marshall taking down Georgia State, though. I think that's going to happen. We'll do the rest of the previews tomorrow following the Marshall Georgia State ball game. All right, so we saw that obvious, and I posted the obvious pass interference. It looked like a Troy interception, which was dropped. Clearly, the refs got that right. But obviously, the Troy defensive back, the other one, tackled the South Alabama wide receiver. That's why the other Troy defensive back had a chance at catching the ball. He was looking back a little bit, but not when he tackled him. And he tackled him. It wasn't like right before the ball got there. It was a good, couple of heartbeats before the ball got there. But I just despise defensive pass interference. And I will give to you that it's the same for both teams, right? It's not like one team gets an advantage and another team doesn't, right? It stinks for the defense. All right. So this is my own 2 cents. I find the definition 101, right? It would be Schultz's definition instead of Webster's definition. Schultz's definition of wide receiver to catch the football. Obviously, they have other responsibilities, but that's basically their job. Defensive back / safety, cornerback, their job is to prevent said wide receiver from catching the football. One caveat, you can't touch the wide receiver before the ball arrives. Okay. So Josh Boutwell, the Troy Messenger, beat writer for the Trojans, he said, well, maybe because the wide receiver or the defensive back was looking back, right? And the wide receiver stopped short because the ball was a little bit underthrown. They didn't throw it because of that. Well, that flag gets thrown all the time. I hate that, but if you run over the wide receiver because the wide receiver stopped, that's a you problem, right? That happens all the time. Throw a streak down the sideline, throw it a little bit short. The defensive back isn't looking, and wide receiver stops, and the defensive back runs right over him. Sometimes when the defensive back is looking back, that's when it's picked off. I don't think, the defensive back's job is to intercept the ball. I think that's a bonus. When you get the interception, that's a bonus. Their job is to prevent the wide receiver from catching the football, period. Without the one caveat, without touching them, at least a lot, before the ball gets there. A lot of times you see some arm jockeying. They're both looking back for the ball. And sometimes the defensive back, although looking back for the ball, has the guy's arm and can't make the catch. Sometimes they get away with that. And sometimes it's just good coverage. But I don't like the idea that the defensive back has to look back for the ball. All right, that rule was changed sometime in my lifetime. Probably should blame Dean Blandino from formerly of Fox Sports, or he still may be of Fox Sports, but basically the NFL. I usually blame bad rules on Dean Blandino. So whoever made that rule is for the offense, right? They wanted the offense. They wanted more points on the board, so they made it more difficult for the defensive backs to cover the wide receivers. I understand that. Still don't like it. My job is to stop you from catching the football. If I'm the defensive back, I should be able to do anything I can, there's no face guarding. There used to be. We thought there's face guarding. There's no face guarding, right? You can put your hands up, whatever the case is. But if you're not looking back, you get called for a flag. So I just don't like defensive pass interference at all. I think it's too much of an advantage, especially the spot foul in the NFL. It can change a ball game, a bad call. You can go from 120 to the next 20. In college football, it's 15 yards. You heard me yesterday in yesterday's episode. I don't even mind defensive pass interference. If I'm getting beat on a deep post, I'm going to try and tackle the guy because otherwise it's either 15 yards or it could be a touchdown. It could be 60 or 70 yards. I'm going to reach for the guy and tackle him, trip him up before he makes that catch. All right. And you're certainly going to give up 15 yards before you want to give up a touchdown. I just don't like defensive pass interference. I think the rule is too much slanted to the defensive or to the offensive players and to the offense. I just don't like it. But I can't change it. But boy, did they change that 12-man rule real quick, like with Dan Lanning. Boy, they changed that. That thing happened Saturday. They changed it by Wednesday. My goodness. They changed that really fast. You know, when they want to change things, they can change things fast. I just despise defensive pass interference. My job should be, and a lot of times you get push-offs. There was one, they called pass interference against South Alabama in that ball game, and maybe in real time it looked different, but on the replay, the Troy wide receiver turned around and slipped. Wasn't pushed. He slipped. And before the South Alabama defensive back could contact him, he was down on the ground. So I really despise it. They tried to fix it in the NFL, but the NFL would never overturn it. Maybe one or two calls were overturned right after the debacle of the Saints-Rams. No defensive pass interference on that, in the NFC Championship game, which was absolutely brutal. They tried to change it. You can review defensive pass interference, but they never would overturn it. It was a joke, right? So I just want to get that off my chest. I hate defensive pass interference. Obviously, what happened the other night was obvious. All right, most fans would agree, whether you were rooting for South Alabama or Troy, that's pass interference. It didn't get called. All right, so if you're a Troy fan, but I think defensive players shouldn't have to look back for the ball and can prevent you from, catching the football. This is the one I really hate, right? You get one of those passes that are short and it hits the defensive back in the frickin' numbers. But they call pass interference because he hit the wide receiver because the ball was thrown underthrown. How does he catch the ball if I'm standing there? He can't. He hits me in the numbers. You shouldn't blame me for a bad throw. So, just wanted to get that off my chest. I hate defensive pass interference. We could do that as a podcast. We'll do different rules or something like that. I don't know how interesting that is, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. It doesn't really have to do with the South Alabama ball game, but you'll see it all the time. Defensive backs making good plays, but they didn't turn around, so it's against it's defensive pass interference. No, he stopped him from making the catch without hitting him before the ball got there. And we're going to tack on something to make it harder, and that's what they do. They put up points on the board. All right, we will be back. We're almost at 1,000. By the way, we're almost at 1,560 subscribers. Really appreciate that. We've had a great week. I ran out of my shorts allotment from Choppity, so I'll have to wait till next month. I made too many. I wasn't told you get one per episode. I was doing 2 or 3 per episode, and then making corrections if I found mistakes. So we'll maybe have to go slower next time. But we're still having a great week. 2,000 is going to be tough. Admittedly, 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year will be tough. Could be closer to 1,800. We'll see. We will be covering basketball, right? And basketball's starting in a couple of weeks. We could talk about that another time. We didn't have an NBA, Sunbelt Media Days live. It was all on Zoom. It's tough in the middle of football season to go cover basketball media days. It just is. All right. Everybody have a great Thursday. We'll have a recap of Marshall and Georgia State coming up on Friday's episode, and we will preview the rest of the Sunbelt action, all of those home underdogs looking for an upset. And again, leave in the comments, are you going to do all the favorite in a parlay just to win? And are you going to do all the favorites to cover? One pays much better, but one is more likely to happen than the other. All right. Again, have a great Friday, everybody. I'll talk to you then. You've been watching and listening to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day.